So Charlotte, what part of Canada are you from before we fully introduce you?
Yeah, well, I grew up in Toronto,
Okay.
Drake's hometown, and now I live in the Niagara region, which is pretty close to Niagara Falls, New York. We're just
Oh
across the
yeah,
border.
so you're close to New York. All right,
Yeah.
so obviously New York got hit hard with the coronavirus, not so much, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, where you are, it was more in the city, correct?
Yeah, Toronto and Vancouver, obviously, because they have a bigger population, seem to have been hit harder, but we actually managed to stave off the worst of it just by staying home mostly since March
Right.
13th.
What would you tell the listeners, since you battled coronavirus for quite a while, about this disease? And even though you're 33, you're in good shape, you still got it, and you kind of went through a lot of issues with it.
Yeah, I'd say it's there's two parts to that answer. For me, I think it's kind of like, okay, if you went up against a firing squad of a thousand people pointing a gun at you and you knew that two of them had a bullet, would you still do it?
Right.
I think that how bad it hits you, we have no idea why it hits certain people as hard as it does. Maybe statistically it hits elderly people worse, but you don't know. I have so many friends, or I know so many people now who have reached out to me who have gotten it, who are my age and younger, and they've basically said, I'm on month 2 of recovery. I still can't go back to work. I still can't see my family. I can't do anything because I am still kind of debilitated and not quite myself. So I'd say that thinking that it won't hit you is you don't know that.
Right.
I wouldn't have thought it would hit me as hard as it did. And two, the second part of my answer is, okay, so if you're not worried about yourself, what about the people you live with? What about your family? What about, do you have elderly relatives who you live with or are close to you? I mean, even, my husband, I put this in the video, my husband is 51. He's 18 years older than me. Scandal. And I was petrified of him getting it. He has Crohn's, he has a few underlying health conditions, and we just had no idea if it hit me this hard, how hard is it going to hit the people I live with? So I think it's, you may have a very high probability of survival, but you still have to get through it. Do you really want to put yourself through that? And do you really want to put your family through that, or your friends, or anybody really?
How did you keep away from him and kind of in quarantine? Obviously, you guys are living together, I assume. So it's got to be quite hard and quite scary that, this stuff is in the air. He could walk through it, and that's the game. He's got it.
Yeah, so basically so I came off a cruise ship contract. That's how I got it. So when I came home, I wore a mask in the airport and in the car. We didn't touch each other. I, stayed 6 feet away from him as much as I could. And then
Mhm.
even before it became clear that I was sick, the plan was for me to spend 2 full weeks upstairs in our bedroom with a separate bathroom, basically like prison, with him bringing me food to my door. And then once it became clear that I was sick, I was so happy that we took those precautions, and we basically continued that way for another 3 weeks. So I didn't leave my bedroom, and if I did to go downstairs to get some sunshine, I wore a mask, and he stayed
Mhm.
in a separate room while I moved around the house, and I touched not a single thing.
Because you brought up that you were on a cruise ship, I assume you were performing, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So with that said, we look back to, and I read an article in Time Magazine about what happened on the cruise ship, and I'm sure you heard about the story that was in Japan, and so many people got sick on that. So can you talk about that cruise line? And you don't have to talk about the name in general, but because I know you worked, but
Sure.
just kind of the way that they kind of quarantined, and how you kind of watched yourself in general through the symptoms and getting sick.
Yeah, well, I mean, luckily or unluckily, it didn't become clear that anyone on my cruise ship was sick until after we all disembarked the ship. So we were in the middle of a 2-week cruise when like a nonstop, when coronavirus kind of hit the States and North America. So they did the best that they could, sort of like keeping everybody uh, They did the best that they could with the information that they had at the time. So we weren't in quarantine at that time. We were kind of going about things as usual. We didn't stop in port. We were supposed to stop in Mexico a couple of times and we didn't. We just steamed right ahead to San Diego. And by the time we all got off, the guests and crew, I got off the second I could. I got off on March 20th. Nobody knew for sure if anybody was sick. And it, me and my individual brain, speaking to, my family and friends back home, I knew that it was probable that somebody on that cruise had it. I didn't quite know how many of us were going to end up having it. Turns out many of the crew ended up getting it after I got off the ship, and I got it and a few guests got it. So in terms of on the ship, there was nothing super extraordinary done, but it became clear after we all got off that we had been kind of circulating this thing for the last week at least. So,
Charlotte, can you talk about the symptoms you had and how they started and they slowly kicked into gear?
Yeah, for sure. So I got home on a Saturday and I felt totally fine on the Sunday. And then the Monday, I slept all day, which is not usual for me. I slept until 11, which usually is quite a challenge for me to do. And I slept the rest of the afternoon and I didn't eat anything. And by the evening, I realized that I'd lost my sense of taste. And I didn't, and again, back then in March, those weren't symptoms that we should be looking out for. It was fever, cough, and sore throat were the three things that everyone was looking out for. So I didn't really think much of it. I thought, oh, maybe I'm getting a cold. I've just come off a very stressful week on a cruise ship. Obviously there's a global pandemic. Maybe I'm just super tired. And then the Tuesday I woke up and I walked downstairs with my mask on to go down to the basement, and I was dizzy and disoriented and sweating, and I basically had to crawl back upstairs to bed. And I took my temperature and I had a low-grade fever. And basically I continued that way for another 10 days. I had a fever, low-grade fever in and out. I was totally fatigued, just could barely sit up in bed even. I had lost my sense of taste and smell, obviously. I lost my appetite. I couldn't even drink water. It was so, I was so unappetized by everything. I was in pain. I was sore. Also, lying around all day is not good for your body. So obviously you're going to get sore. My legs were super sore. Yeah, so it was awful. And you're in so much pain that you can't really sleep, but you're so tired that it's all you want to do. So yeah.
So can we go?
That's it.
Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah,
And this is Charlotte Knight here on Fire Breathing Rob. Charlotte, can you talk about the next step? So you went through those symptoms. Did you go to the hospital? Did you call up the doctor? What did you do?
So luckily in Canada at that point, I was able to get a test. So I drove myself to the testing center in that horrible condition on the Thursday. I got tested. And once you come back with a positive test in Canada, a public health nurse is assigned to your case. So I got a phone call every day to check up on my symptoms. She also called my husband and my stepdaughter who lives with us to make sure that they weren't having any symptoms. I also have a very good friend who's a doctor who called me twice a day just to make sure that my breathing was okay. He kind of said, if you have any more trouble breathing, let me know and we'll figure out if you should go to the hospital or not. So I didn't end up going to the hospital because I knew that they wouldn't be able to do anything for me in that state unless it got worse. And I didn't want to overload the system by going to the hospital for, something I knew they couldn't help me with. But luckily I had two medical professionals calling me every day.
You said that, so there's a healthcare professional that calls you up daily and checks in and says, hey, what's the story? Did they give you any kind of over-the-counter medication or try to tell you what to take or do, or how does it work?
No. I mean, I took Tylenol to sort of keep my fever at bay, but it was such a low-grade fever that they actually recommended I kind of stop taking Tylenol so that I let the fever kind of help fight what I was fighting. And I actually didn't know that either. I was shocked when I got my positive test result and public health called me and she said, okay, so my name is, I can't even remember what her name was because I was in such a comatose state. But she said, my name is, Cindy, let's call her. And I'll call you every day at 9 a.m. And this is my direct line. So if you have a problem, make sure you give me a call. So I actually didn't even realize, obviously we haven't been through a global pandemic before in Canada. So, I imagine that those systems are always in place in case of something like this. I have a feeling that during SARS, they probably had the same, they probably had the same systems kind of set up. But yeah, I mean, one of the reasons I'm so thankful to be living in Canada is that these things are provided for.
What do you think about the precautionary measures that Canada is taking in general as far as their healthcare system and Justin Trudeau and the government compared to what they're not doing here in America?
Well, I think it's a difference in philosophies. It starts with that. So in Canada, we are used to paying into the middle so that everybody benefits. That's how our economy is set up. That's how our healthcare system is set up. That's how our education system, I mean, everything. Nobody here complains about paying taxes because it benefits everybody. So as an example, so the precautionary measures that we have taken have hit our economy incredibly hard. We just announced a deficit. We're gonna post a deficit of almost $1 trillion this year. But everyone I know who is out of work has been paid the Canadian Emergency Response Benefit, which is $2,000 a month to everybody who has lost their job. So not a single person that I know who has lost their job has not been able to pay a mortgage payment or rent or anything like that. So I think it's a cost benefit philosophy that's a bit different here, in that we are willing to take on debt in order for our entire country to not fall into personal and economic ruin. And same with healthcare. We pay a lot of money in taxes. I'm not going to lie. We pay income tax and tax on everything we buy, so that when someone gets cancer or when there's a pandemic happening, we have everybody provided for. And that's just how we're used to operating in Canada. And I understand that if you're not used to operating that way, it can be quite a psychological shift in this idea that I pay into a system so that my neighbor can eat.
Right.
Whether or not I know my neighbor or whether or not I like my neighbor, it's just something that we accept and we actually are very proud of. So I'm not going to lie, the precautionary measures that have taken place in Canada have hit our economy incredibly difficult. It's incredibly hard. A lot of people are out of work, especially in the service industry, and it kind of sucks to not be able to go out and see friends and to a bar and all of this stuff. But we've kind of made our peace with it. And especially me as a theater worker, I mean, theater will not be a thing for a while, and I've had to really accept that. But the attitude of people here is always optimism, and it will come back as long as we pay into the system now so that tomorrow things will be better.
As far as healthcare and welfare systems, Canadians have it, way better than we do here in America. Would you agree with that?
I would. I would say that we also don't have as many instances of extreme wealth as Americans do. So, the wealthy people in our country don't seem to have as big of a problem sort of paying into a system for people who are lower on the totem. Sorry, that's a terrible thing to say now. Lower on the economic spectrum than they are. Sorry, I'm learning new things every day.
You're fine.
Yeah. So, I mean, the benefits that we get, and I'll say, nothing is perfect. We have property in Florida, so we have conversations with our neighbors all the time about the difference in philosophies in our two countries. And, our healthcare system is not perfect. Our education system is not perfect. However, talking to my friends, my post-secondary education was heavily subsidized. And depending on your economic status, if you are living closer to or near on the poverty line, your post-secondary education, should you choose to go to university, is heavily subsidized by the government so that you can afford it. I mean, I have friends who paid $50,000 a year to go to university. Mine was nowhere near that. So yeah, I feel as though, and it's funny that you call it socialism, because in Canada, we just call that the way of life. It's not, if you look at countries like Sweden, they have taxes that are, they get taxed 70%, but everything is taken care of. They don't pay for university. They don't pay for healthcare. They don't pay for education. All of this stuff is provided for. So, I mean, really, why do you want to hold on to your wealth so hard because you'll eventually, like, you know, you'll have to pay for healthcare. So why wouldn't you just pay a little bit all the time? I think that the way to get away from the propaganda, or as you call it, or even just the sort of these buzzwords that get thrown around in the American media is to branch out. Watch the BBC, watch how things in other countries are done, because it's not just Canada. We inherited our system from the Brits, and they have the NHS. Look at Germany, does a fantastic job. Australia, New Zealand, I mean, the list goes on. The number of countries that have universal public health care the number of countries who have that is higher than the number of countries that don't. So I think that traveling is not an option at the moment, but if you branch out and read news about other countries, you'll realize that these things called, I mean, this way of life called, that you know, that in America gets called socialism, is actually just pretty normal for a lot of the rest of the world. And I think that to insulate yourself with only American news and American media, you get a very one-sided view of the way that things can be done. And I think being willing to learn from other people is important. I think being willing to learn from the way other countries do things is important, because you get a better perspective and you get more options to choose from in terms of how you want to run your systems.
How is that all working out as far as, you know, not being able to work?
Yeah, well, I mean, luckily, people in the arts are used to having to hustle to make it work. So we all know, I mean, if you're lucky enough to have had job after job after job, you may be going to the drawing board right now at this moment. But luckily, I have mastered the side hustle beyond beyond anything. So you know, I teach, and right now I'm teaching online. I have investment properties, which I set up in my 20s when I knew that I may not make a lot of money as an artist. So I made sure to take care of myself that way. I work part-time at a law office as well, which I've maintained. And also now I'm making a little bit of money from a YouTube channel. So the economics of theater not being a thing right now is actually not as distressing to me as the idea that maybe theater won't be able to return anytime soon. That mentally is actually harder than economically, and that's just my experience, because I am used to hustling to make a living when I'm not working. But yeah, it's kind of hard as an artist to think, oh my gosh, you know, this career that we've trained for and worked for and invested in ourselves and really pounded the pavement for may not come back in the same way that we're used to. So how are we going to adapt? And just, I think it's the fear of the unknown, you know.
Yeah, I agree.
More than anything. And two, you know, having had it, at this moment, I can't expect if somebody were to open a theater and put on a show, I can't responsibly expect an entire audience to cram into a 1,000-seat theater to watch me sing right now. It's just not, it's not practical. It's not responsible. So I'm able to kind of sit back and go, okay, the rat race is no longer running at the moment. So what am I going to do to maintain myself as an artist, but also continue with life and hope that it comes back one day. So
Charlotte Knight, singer-songwriter here on Fire Breathing Rob. Definitely check out her YouTube page at Charlotte Knight, Knight.